Hello, I hope you like my cute little hat. I thought it was very Victorian. Victoria 3 is going to be here soon, and I have some big thinkies about it. Half-Life 3 Vicky memes aside, I do actually have a lot of thoughts about it. On one hand, I am pretty excited for a lot of reasons, and on the other hand, I have some questions too, just going on what we've seen so far from dev diaries and the gameplay and everything else they've shown us so far. I thought it would be cool to just talk about Victoria 3 for a bit. So Victoria 3 is Paradox's successor to Victoria 2, which is a game that was released in the Dark Ages, basically. I only really became familiar with it because of the Vicky 3 confirmed memes, and then it was actually confirmed, which is kind of crazy. What is there about the game that is worthy of talking about? What's different from other Paradox games? In Victoria 2, you never actually had that much control over your own economy, which is kind of funny because it's you could also enter massive economic spirals, global decades-long recessions from what I've heard. You basically had no way to change the makeup of your population directly, besides building factories and using national focuses and things like that. All of those things very indirectly impacted your provinces. Any effects that you wanted to make took literal years and decades to actually see happen in the game. You couldn't really change anything about your RGOs, your resource gathering operations. You're basically just stuck with the goods that the province had outside of resource discovery, rare events, and things like that. So it's not like you had that much direct control over things. You didn't also really have any real way to direct immigration, if you wanted to focus on a resource or a good that you wanted to create. Even the immigration national focuses, they only affected things very slightly. Out of all of those things, I think those are the things in Victoria 3 that they're going to be improving on the most from what I can tell. It looks like buildings are going to be the focus of Victoria 3's economy. A building is an in-game unit where your population works, if they're qualified. If no population is there to work, a building is effectively useless, which is fair. Something labor theory of value. All buildings can be built by the player, although subsistence buildings just appear if there's unused arable land in a state. Unlike in Victoria 2, population will be used to construct the buildings as well, so it'll actually take a certain amount of labor to build the buildings in the first place, which feels a lot more realistic than it was in Victoria 2. There's a bigger variety of buildings too. The RGOs in Victoria 2 are basically gone in place of resource and agricultural buildings, and these buildings look to give you far more control of the economic underpinning of an industrial economy. You get to build up each individual fishing, lumber, and iron industry in each individual state so that you can actually industrialize your economy very deliberately and in a way that you think makes sense for developing your country. And so if you have a resource shortage in your country, you can directly take actions to shore up certain industries in order to fill those gaps that you might have economically. It seems as though, on the other hand, there is a limit to the amount of land that you can use for certain purposes, like arable land to farm with, and a maximum size to each resource building in each state, which I guess is just based on the pure geographical limits that they have set up per province. In Victoria 3, they're considering factories as urban buildings, which makes sense, and you'll be able to build them alongside agricultural buildings and things like that. Those buildings, for example, should take the goods that you gather from those buildings through those industrial centers, make brand new products by probably doing child labor. You need to claw your way out of a feudal subsistence farming economy into something that resembles more of a modern industrialized economy where people have opportunity and things like that. I cannot stress enough how big of an impact this will have. That's so cool. The ends justify the means, right? A feature they're bringing back from Victoria 2 is population, and they're revitalizing the whole gameplay mechanic in order to make it a lot more in-depth, both in how it shows you information about your population and in how you can directly utilize their labor. So population represents both your working population and in people who are dependents, so children, women at the start of the game for most places. You can change that through laws over time. A pop can be one of many different professions. It determines where they work, their social class, and its wages. Some of the professions are capitalists, bureaucrats, officers, shopkeepers, machinists, and peasants too. There's a huge quantity of them. Each pop will have an average standard of living between 1 to 99. So at the lowest end, your pops will be considered starving and struggling, but at the highest end, they'll be lavish and opulent. Pops will also consume goods that they use their wealth to purchase, which is determined by their wages. And they're still population strata, they're still population classes, but they're a lot less rigid. There's no guarantee one population of social strata will earn more than another just based on the actual pop itself. It's very possible even for like a clerk or a laborer to earn more than an aristocrat or a capitalist, which is so based. All individuals in a pop can either be politically inactive or they can support an interest group as a new mechanic in Victoria 3. So each interest group will have a multitude of pops who support them, giving them political strength. There is a ratio of how many individuals can be politically active depending on their literacy, profession, and their wealth, basically. Populations aren't all created equally, and a pop with wealth can give an interest group a lot more clout and representation than it would otherwise have on its own. Some populations literally have no political strength, being disenfranchised by the laws of the nation and shit. Unaccepted cultures, religion, and women.
The American people are tired of women.
Interest groups can subscribe to many different ideologies which determine what laws they will support in your government. So for example, it looks like trade unions are going to support significantly different laws than aristocrats or landowners will. It also looks like these groups can change their opinion on laws throughout the game depending on the stances of their leaders and things like that. Different interest groups in different nations will also have different unique ideologies based on their religion and culture. So like Confucian scholars will have different priorities than other interest groups. Interest groups will also gain a certain level of political clout depending on the political strength the pops give them compared to every other interest group in the nation. Interest groups will also have an approval rating depending on their opinion of the nation's laws. And these approval ratings translate into traits that can give you positives and negatives, which scale in intensity depending on how powerful they are. The extreme end, if an interest group just hates your government, they can even start a civil war, which is pretty crazy and dynamic, and I love it so much. In democracies, interest groups band together to form political parties, which form the basis of your nation's government. Political parties are treated like united blocs. If you want the intelligentsia in your government, you have to invite all of the other interest groups in its party too, like coalition building type stuff. Interest groups can also be marginalized, so like they're literally barred from entering any political party, even in democracies. I want to talk a little bit about warfare in Victoria 3 too. This is where I've seen the most like questions and concerns about Victoria 3, because I know that Autumn, for example, is very, very angry about it because it's like apparently a radical oversimplification of what even existed in Victoria 2. Basically, instead of armies moving on provinces, the new military system is armies assigned to a front line. You basically have very little control over the direct specifics on each front. You can't really move individual units around or anything like that. But she said it's the equivalent of like a total war game throwing out field battles. I think where I'm at, it's clear that they're trying to differentiate Victoria 3 enough by cutting some of the fat. I don't know if it'll result in like a more or less fun gameplay experience, but it's important to remember that not everyone plays these games for the warfare either. Yeah, so I guess that's basically everything I wanted to say about Victoria 3. Like, I do have some questions about like how the warfare system will work out and things like that, but everything else I've seen about the game I do like a lot. It is a big improvement. I love the artwork. I love the style of the game. Appreciate it. Here's the channel member supporters. Thank you so much. If you want to see a video is sort of similar to Victoria 3, it's the modern day, and I'm trying to make the country of Sealand like a micronation, an actual empire, watch this video here because I love it and it doesn't have enough views. Okay, thank you. Bye.